Hello, and thank you for attending today's class. Today's class is called the Data Warehouse Overview. I am your presenter today, Annalyn Hawks from the Asterisk Intelligence team. So this is a 30-minute class, and we're going to start with kind of discussing some of the general details and strategies related to the data warehouse product we're offering. It's a brand new offering for credit unions that use CU-Base today, and specifically geared toward those of you who are looking for more ways to connect multiple sources of data and looking for more control over some of those, just the many sources of data that we have out there today. Then we're going to transition a little bit into some time actually inside CU-Base Gold itself. So we'll look at the different tools that are used to manage the data warehouse. So a few housekeeping items. I just have to note that today all your microphones have been muted to eliminate background noise. But if you have a question, just send it in through the chat feature. So that's just the chat icon on your icon bar for this web connection. And that will open up a chat window, and you can use that to type in your message. I will see that coming through on my screen, and we'll stop and address that. We are also, when we get into CU-Base, we're going to be working in a sample credit union environment today. So anything that we see is not living in some, a credit union's actual data warehouse. Or, it'll be all fake member data if we happen to pull anything up that way. I don't think so today, but we'll take a look. So, I just mentioned a second ago that there are credit unions who have a data warehouse today, and that is true. So if you kind of leave this webinar and you think, I feel like I know what it is, but I'm not sure how I might use it, or I kind of want to talk to some people who've been using it already, then let me know, and I can make some connections and get you talking to some people who are using this already. We actually had about 10 or 14 credit unions doing some beta testing with this data warehouse all throughout 2018. So we've had quite a few people, data-interested people, working with it so far. So yeah, we're going to talk about how you can incorporate the data warehouse into your credit union goals for using and analyzing your data. And one really big part of that is that there needs to be a person. If you are that person, this is an easy answer, but we have to ask ourselves the question, do I have a database administrator type of person at my credit union? And I don't mean a dedicated role. I don't mean someone who's got that in their title, or who's, a full-time dedicated to managing data and data sources. We all know that's probably not something in the cards for a lot of you guys. But this is the person who is in tune with the data at your credit union. So this might be, practically speaking, this might be a query writer. This might be someone who knows the CU-Base database to the point of actually being able to build custom reports with the various data tables that live in CU-Base today already, your live processing data. Your member, transaction, product data might be and they're probably in tune as well with some of those outside data sources, like, you've got imaging data that lives on some of the imaging servers. You've got, if you've got offline loan products or deposit products, then everything about those products lives in someone else's system. We don't see it in CU-Base unless you send any, you have some special program that sends it to our system, and we've built a mechanism for you there. So, you have many sources of information and many companies that store information about your members, and you quite often will find yourself, correct me if I'm wrong, you'll quite often find yourself working with a new vendor or a current vendor, and they say, I need you to send me my core data, or your core data. I need you to send me a list of this, and this about your members, or this, and this about your loans. I need you to send that to me. And whatever you're paying them to do, that makes sense to you. You're looking at it and you're saying, all right, I can see how you need that information. So you're going through this process to pull all the data down out of the core, where you have it's a very rich, large set of data in the core, and send it out to someone else. And some of you are out there thinking to yourselves, if I could just get the information that I know they're receiving from this other vendor who services this kind of loan, and this other marketing platform that is sending the campaign to these people, I think I could run this report myself. It'd be so much easier if I could just get those other two sets of information and put it in CU-Base next to the core data that I have and actually just pull that, write that report or do that analysis myself. And that's the idea here today. We're talking about using data storage for analysis. If you are looking at some of the things that you're looking at having other companies do for you, or you're looking at all these places your data lives and you're saying, I wish I could have that in CU Base to look at myself anytime I wanted, then a data warehouse might be something that makes sense for you. I'll say one of the things that we got to think about, and before we talk about this graphic, one of the things I do want to make the point, I mentioned the imaging servers. You've got data out on imaging servers sometimes and a few other places. That point of using data for analysis does mean that there are some data sources or data purposes that we did not design this data warehouse to support. So it's not a DRBC storage solution for you. It's not something that you want to just be relying on for all your backups of everything. It's not an imaging solutions database either. So, this is rows and columns. This is numbers and text strings and date values. This is not pictures. This is not a place where we can store pictures or imaging data. Stuff like that. If you have questions about what exactly can be stored in this data warehouse in CU Base, then I encourage you to think about it as just exactly like, say, the core, FILExxDW. And if these character strings are not familiar to you, then there's someone at your credit union who probably does recognize what these are right away. And just to briefly break it down for you, FILExxDW, the little XX code, is your specific 2-character ID. So every one of you has a different one. And in my sample credit union, I think it's WU. So we'll use that. We'll use those 2 letters as we talk. So file WU is the core. It's your primary processing database. If you're a query writer, you recognize that right away. You can probably also then quickly understand what you're dealing with when we say that file WU-DW, look all the way over on the right in the purple pillar here. The data warehouse is exactly, from a database perspective, exactly like these other storage locations that do already live in the core today. The other 4 are totally free. You're not paying any, you're paying certain fees and in general, processing fees for various functions and purposes of having CU Base in the first place. But the 4 to the left are included in all of that. The data warehouse is a paid-for space, so you need to purchase it from us. There's a cost involved. We'll talk numbers in a second. But know that this is now this purple pillar, the data warehouse, is just another one of these data storage locations in CU Base that, functionally speaking, is the same. We can store the same types of tables, the same types of data right there in that data warehouse. Again, from multiple sources, from outside the core. This is the only one out of these 5 pillars that can receive data from outside the core in any format that is received by you. There might be custom programming projects you've reached out to us before to have us do, or very basic, simple 1-column uploads that you can do into the file WU or the query WU location. But those are heavily managed, there's a lot of rules around them, and they're not customizable. The data warehouse is, as I had mentioned, it's actually separated, and it's completely empty to start right off because it's dedicated for your use. Every one of these other environments has data that automatically has to live in it for some processing function, or because you're building reports and you need a place to store those custom reports. That's the query library. Okay, so the data warehouse is, we build it for you. It's another one of, it lives in this family of database environments, but it's empty and it's dedicated for you to use. And anyone else at your credit union who maybe wants to draw upon the data or populate new data into it from any of the, maybe an incentive tracking sheet you're running every month and you want your branch manager to upload it to your data warehouse so that you can actually do some of the calculations and, tie it out to employee ID and break down the analysis of how much your employees are selling right there in the system. That's an option. A couple other things, we could get into reasons later, or different use cases for the data warehouse later. But just to take a look at this graphic, hopefully it's starting to make sense that because it's a CU-based data warehouse, it lives alongside these other environments, but you really don't get very much control or features. You know, it's essentially the three on the left are pretty much just for processing. That's the primary function of CU-based anyway. And that query library, we'll talk a little bit more about that actually, about the query library compared to the data warehouse anyway. Because if you are familiar with these terms, you know, at any level, if you've seen these or worked with these environments before, you're thinking to yourself, no, wait a minute, the query library is a custom storage space. I can go do a dashboard export, or I can write a query and set the output. I can make my own custom list. And you've always told me to put that in the query library. So what is different? Do I need to now start putting those in the data warehouse? And what if I don't have one? I'm not paying you for one. Does that mean my abilities to use the query library are going to go away? These types of questions are very valid, and I want to make sure we cover them today. The query library is not changing. It will still receive and be able to interface with all of those other programs that are built into CU-based, those dashboard exports that can point things to it. When you build your own custom report and you want to put your custom lists in the query library, you still can. You definitely can. But one thing, you know, you may or may not have run into in the past is the query library naturally, way before we ever built the data warehouse, this was the case. It was originally designed for short-term data storage. So your actual custom reports will stick around forever unless you choose to delete them. But the data those reports generate, or those dashboard exports we're talking about, they have a short shelf life. If you're not updating them frequently, right now I think that purge retention is about 60 days, potentially less, then we're actually deleting that data out of the query library. So that's the point where you say to yourself, I think I might need a data warehouse if I want to say, I want to keep this list around longer, I want to have it available for maybe some more long-term ROI tracking on a mortgage campaign I just ran with my marketing department. Or I've created this list of individuals we had to pull for an audit for some reason, and I never want to overwrite this file. This is that list of people. I don't want to lose this list of people. I don't want it gone in 60 days. You know, previously you would have had to download that, keep it on your shared drive, perhaps in Excel or something, to make it permanent. Now that FILExxDW is available to just flip it over into that location instead using query. And it's now the data warehouse has entirely user controlled. You control how long a file lives in there. There's no automated routines that are, you know, getting rid of older tables in there. On the one hand, that means you have some work to do. That's why we talked about maybe thinking, who is the database administrator at your credit union? Because those are things you got to be watching and paying attention for. And remember, you are paying for space that is utilized in that data warehouse. So you definitely want to have some routines where someone's going in and looking for really old stuff that you really don't need anymore. But in my examples, you've got this list, you want to keep it in the core. You want to keep it in the core because you want to have it available for future queries. You don't want to have it down in Excel where you can't link it back into all the rest of the information on the core about those members. You know, imagine, you know, as soon as you know this person's account number, if you've got any list that you've received from, say, I'm trying to think, there's someone who wants to pull in their marketing, they ran a marketing campaign, sent some emails through a third-party email platform, and now they have these sets of reports that tell them who opened and who clicked any link within that email. And they want to upload that, link it back to their original contact list, find more information based on those email addresses, like what is the average age and gender who is most often clicking on my links, who's actually engaging, how do I study the person who's engaging. So they upload that list, and they're able to do some analysis then on those people who are actually interacting with and taking advantage of the promotion, and then also track how many people who clicked actually did go book a loan, rather than have to manually one by one by hand looking that up based on, again, the open and click report that lives in Excel on their computer and the core that holds all that information about your member. and your products, right? So that whatever product we're promoting. So I keep getting into the different examples of ways to use this because there really are quite a lot, and that's where it comes down to what is your credit union sort of need or pain point or wish that you could have a custom space to store data in the core so that it is connectable to the rest of the information in the core on your products or your transactions or your members. There's so many different ways we could take that, but to get back to the point of this slide we're looking at here, the query environment is not changing yet. You should still use it just like, as you normally do today. But if you do purchase the data warehouse, you do have that location as a supplemental opportunity to manage, say, long-term, have a little bit more control over long-term retention of certain tables you're looking to keep, custom data tables you're looking to keep. And of course, that it's now that bridge. The data warehouse is now that bridge that acts as a space to bring in data from outside the core, and using query actually link it up to everything else that lives in FILExxDW and your end of month files and anything that you know today about your members or your transactions or your products. So, we want to talk for a second about how I've mentioned query a couple times. And if that tool is not familiar to you, that it's actually an IBM, query is actually an IBM tool, and we've labeled it Report Builder in CU-Base. And so that's another name you might hear it called by. So query is going to be the primary, I guess, tool in your tool belt for working with anything in the data warehouse. One of two primary tools. There is another IBM tool that we've integrated right into CU-Base as well that involves, it's called the data transfer tool, the client access data transfer tool. And that one is going to allow you to interface that outside data right with the database and import it and upload it. And essentially it will, for the first time ever, you'll be able to take an Excel file and map it. Essentially, it just sort of reads that Excel file and translates it to what sort of data formats and column, field lengths. Say your first name, your longest you got a first name in the file, and your longest first name is 25 characters long. It knows that automatically and will sort of make that best guess about how to build a compatible spot on CU-Base to have that data live in your data warehouse. So those two IBM tools, there really are IBM tools, so they're not something we built. They're not homegrown to CU Answers, but we have integrated them into CU-Base Gold, and you probably use them in some capacity every day. But you will use them more and more as you, of course, put more and more data into this data warehouse if you purchase one, and they'll become very, very familiar to you as those primary, as I said, features and tools for working with the data. That hopefully they're already familiar to you. Again, these are tools you're already using to write queries and custom reports off of core data and storing them in the query library. And tool 1375, I know you guys, maybe not you personally, but a lot of our folks out there are doing processes every day, every month, regularly that are uploading and downloading data from CU-Base. That's moving it in and out of the core. So those two tools, definitely want to spotlight those. They are familiar to you if you've been using them for any of those, daily processes, regular processes that you might already do. There's no learning curve there if you're already familiar with those. Or a very light one, right? If there might be some new features in there, new tricks we'll introduce to you as far as tool usage and kind of how to use them works. But the other thing to keep in mind is that if you've been thinking about or researching data warehousing at all, for your credit union, you're thinking to yourself, I really need to have a spot where we can merge, stuff from multiple locations and store it for working with or analyzing, or just to have available to research, even if you're not going to analyze it. Then you've probably ran into, many different solutions and ways of working it out there. But one thing that makes ours, every data warehouse has pros and cons, of course. But one thing that sets ours, I think, in almost a different class, and I don't mean a class above, but a different, just a different application and way of thinking, right, is that ours is, of course, a shared resource solution. as is really all of your use of CU Base for if you're an online client, because we're producing and providing for you all of the hardware involved with actually having a space to store this data. It's all the same hardware we use for CU Base already. We already have it. We're not charging you anymore to buy more or create more space for you or anything like that. We have the hardware, we have the software. That's the CU Base gold screens and tools and programs that we've developed for you to work with to view the data. And you have the Asterisk Intelligence team as a knowledge resource and the training team, and you're reaching out to us when you first buy one of these. We reach out to you actually with a welcome packet and a series of tutorial videos and a few other things as well, and then we're your support desk. If you're going to go build an in-house data warehouse yourself, you just want to get into the game, you want to have one, and for it you have a few specific purposes you're thinking of using a data warehouse for. You're looking at potentially having to buy that hardware yourself, having to find some software to actually throw over it, and paying for the actual, pieces or licenses that are necessary. So none of that really comes into play here, even though the data warehouse does have a cost involved. The majority of it is related to, covering our operations on the operational side. Daily, there's a lot that goes on in the back end when the operations is moving things around and tracking things, and the space that you use. Okay, so when we talk about the space that you use, there's a cost involved, and that's that third price on the pricing list here, $10 per gigabyte per month. Okay, so that flexes up and down if you are using less or more space. Automatically, our billing process is smart enough to recognize that. It's keeping track of your data warehouse size every day, and at the end of the month we average out those days, and that's the space utilization that your impact has been for the month. And then we say, is that anywhere from 0 to 1 gigabyte, we charge you $10. Is that anywhere from 1 to 2 gigabytes, we'll charge you $20. Anywhere from 2 to 3, $30, etc. So because of the tools we'll see in CU Base in a second, you have the ability to keep an eye on that. One, you can see how your library size is moving throughout the month. Every day we calculate that number and show it to you, and it calculates, you can go into one of our tools and it'll show you your library size right now, this very second as well. And there's tools where you can manage those files, and actually you can really quickly just go identify and pop out the largest 4 or 5 files that you have and delete them, get rid of them right away. They're gone immediately, and that brings your space allocation down by however much, whatever size those files were. So you want to keep an eye on that. But again, I would like to make the point that a gigabyte sounds like not a lot of space, but so far yet, I haven't seen any credit unions get anywhere close to actually storing more than a gigabyte. We have a data set called Phone Optics that is an optional, it's an optional feature of CU Base that if you choose to turn it on so that you can analyze those phone support engagements. It's a click tracking. Each record is a record of someone clicking a feature in Phone Operator to support the member. And the only place that Phone Optics data can go is a data warehouse. So you have to have a data warehouse to have Phone Optics. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because we had Phone Optics on for our beta testers, 14 credit unions I mentioned. We turned them on for that many credit unions, and collectively across the entire group, it took them 6 months to collectively collect enough to have it represent more than 1 gigabyte of data. So 14 credit unions, 6 months of data collection, large data set. It's tracking everything that gets clicked in Phone Operator by anybody. And we had some of our largest, as in most highest number of employees, credit unions in this beta group. So it's one of those things where, you want to watch it because any one file could be a really, really large one. You throw it up there and boom, it puts you over the next threshold. But for a general use case, we don't see this fluctuating very widely for you. It'll be easy to keep track of. And again, you have the tools to control that space fee. As a baseline, though, you're also looking at $100 a month. So all told, minimum monthly recurring fees are $110 a month. That's that $100 base fee plus your $10 per gigabyte fee. And that could flex up right to 120, 130, 140, 150 if you're getting crazy and putting a lot in there. But 110 is where you're starting out. And then as a one-time charge, there's a $1,000 implementation fee. So you place that order for a data warehouse. We're going to do a series of steps and processes to actually build that for you and set it up and prepare and coordinate sort of that initial onboarding. And that's what the $1,000 implementation charge is for. The one-time thing, there's no cancellation fees if that's a question coming to anyone's mind. And then what you're looking at moving forward is $110 a month. So we ask ourselves the question, at $110 a month, I've got this cost and maybe I'm comfortable with that amount right now. Maybe I think that's too much for data storage. And although we think it's a very competitive value for data storage, very competitive, it's not, you know, you still have to be doing things with the data warehouse and with the data, perhaps to feel like, you know, you're getting a value out of it. What is your purpose of having the data warehouse? Is it to maintain access to certain data sets? Then what does that mean to you, and do you feel like that's worth the cost? If it's 1, 2, or 3, maybe not, depending on the type of the data set. But what else can you do with this platform? What other resources or opportunities do you have to come bring in outside data and start to learn new things or fill in some holes of pictures, you know, of the picture of your membership and learn things you didn't know before that can assist with making better decisions or communicating aspects or decisions better? How many times can you bring a set of outside data into the core and link it up to core data to potentially analyze? There's a list of opportunities here. Just a couple examples. It's not a comprehensive list. And this is one of the 2 different strategies we've been talking about so far. Bringing new data in. And that could be some of this, it could potentially even be non-member data you've collected at events, maybe, or purchased for marketing projects, right? So I don't know if many of you know, but you do have a non-member database in the core today. These are people who have applied for a loan with you but did not ever actually get approved, so you never opened a membership for them. But you do have their information stored for a set period of time, I believe. And maybe some of those individuals are people who have interacted with you recently for another reason, or you're targeting them for some communications for another reason, and we can link that up to their additional information that you know. Forms Generator is a different CU Answers product, and you can take a look and read for yourself. We won't cover all of these, but it's another CU Answers product the IRSC team kind of coordinates. And if you're using this one, you're getting responses from members periodically. And if you've collected anything that can help you identify that member, you can now bring that up into the data warehouse and link it out to everything else you know about that member. One of the other strategies is keeping core data for longer, or those specialty data sets like phone optics. Okay, so here's a couple of those ideas. Again, we'll go quick through this slide because we've talked about most of these ideas, right? So managing custom retention routines for data tables you've always wished that you could keep longer. There's a couple of things that you could ask us to turn on, which would automatically keep more data in the core. Transaction history is one of them that comes to mind. You can ask us to keep 6 months more of checking account history, transactions. And we can turn that on for you. Does not require a data warehouse. It would just keep that extra history right on the core for you to have available. But there's a very small list of those things that we are able to just do and have that live on the core. If there's a certain data set you've just always wished you could go back further than 90 days on or something like that, then when you have this data warehouse, use it, whether you have it for this purpose exclusively or other analysis opportunities you're pursuing. Use it for some of those options as well. Take that table, set up a query to automatically run and take the take the most recent end of month and append it to a growing historical file you're creating on your own, for example. So these are all some very, very good opportunities, but I'll just take the point to circle back around and say, remember, you want to have a database administrator or someone who is assigned these roles of managing these routines if you're going to have a data warehouse. Because all of that work is on you. It's an entirely user-managed space. Asterisk Intelligence is not offering any services to have us manage the data warehouse for you. We built it for you, and we built tools for you to have anyone at your credit union actually manage that space. And so we will train, and then we pass off, and it's yours to do what you would like with. So, a couple of technical details if anyone had any questions here, right? So, are we able to do downloads? Yes, you can. Of course you can. You can pull it down your computer. Are we able to do uploads? Does it have, I'll point this one out, does it have a data presentation layer? You know, Query is a data mining tool. It's all about looking at the raw data tables and linking the information together and maybe doing some basic calculations and things on it. But presentation is drawing pictures and charts and graphs. If you have a Tableau or a Power BI application, you are not going to be able to link this to our data warehouse. That would require an ODBC connection, and we are not currently supporting ODBC connections. So if that's something that's crossing your mind, you know, I haven't had that question come through from you guys, but in case that's something that's crossing your mind, wanted to make sure I mentioned that really quickly. And then to close this out, I want to jump over to CU Base, and if you've kind of seen and heard what you want to see in here, that's just fine. Go ahead and stop at this point, but if you're interested in seeing the technical side of some of the tools, then stick around and we'll jump into those for a second. Really briefly, it's not a full demo or tutorial of the tools, but we'll look at the actual tool numbers and some of those screens involved. But if you want more information, the slides we've looked at today are posted online, including a few extras actually that I did not include. And that would be on our, this middle number 2 here, the Asterisk Intelligence page of cuanswers.com. Hit the data warehousing menu option on the right-hand menu column. And then at the bottom of the page, there's 3, 4, 5, I want to say, different documents linked that will provide you with those resources, like the slide deck we see today, the I think 27-page booklet that gets deeper into the technical specs, a sales flyer if you want to show your CEO or your IT guy or your marketing person some of this information. Some of those resources are good to go pull and point them toward that. Video tutorials on ondemand.com as well if you'd like to go actually look at, you know, some of the more specific processes of uploading a file and mapping an Excel file and how that might work. Check those out as well. Okay, so again, at this point, we'll just kind of a bonus material. We will jump into CU Base. Just like I had said, we want to look at what some of these tools actually are. Some of them are new. Some of them are new tools that we developed specifically for, again, that idea that credit unions either have or may want to have in the future a database administrator style of person who wants to have their hands on data in more ways and in deeper ways. Not just a data warehouse. We love the fact that there's a data warehouse right now. I personally am very happy that we as in Asterisk Intelligence have worked to develop this and are able to offer it. But more options and more visibility on all those other little pillars we saw in the initial graphic are one thing that I am particularly proud of, having built these tools to kind of increase the ability to use and really kind of just generally increase the collective knowledge about what the database even is and what the data footprint even is. As a perfect example, I have gone ahead and searched the word library, because each one of those pillars in the IBM language, right, we call it a library sometimes, and that's what it's labeled as in Query, I think. So that's the common word we're seeing across these tool titles. And if I go into the library statistics dashboard, remember we're in a test credit union, so WU is our 2-character ID. And I'm going to sort this date column so that we see the most recent date first. And right away, we've actually got some quick statistics on the FILExxDW, the FILEW library, the end of month library. This is FILEWE. Here's our data warehouse. This is a test credit union that has a data warehouse built. So FILEWDW, and then the query library. And each one of these, we've got an individual size calculated. In this case, it's filtered to show, or it's set up to show literally down to the individual byte. Okay, so we got to do some quick math to figure out that this is roughly 3 gigabytes or so. But that's your data. This is your data footprint. This is the size collectively across these kind of primary database environments. This is the footprint, and the data warehouse is at 42, roughly speaking, megabytes. So there's 32 objects inside it. We've got 32 files stored there. In the other library environments, like for example, we'll take the query. An object could be either a file or a query definition or a program. So we're not always just looking at, a raw count of the number of data tables in one of these, but just to let you know what we're looking at. So we can trend this over time now. This all lives in a data table you could download and start to draw charts and graphs with in Excel or something. But this can now be trended over time, and we could filter ourselves down to just one library at a time and start to see how that's been changing. So a couple of weeks ago, we were at 1,229 objects, and we have produced or created a net 15 or so more in 2 weeks' time. So you can catch anomalies in here really quickly as well. If over time people are starting to really just like write your data warehouse really often, then you can start to see that really quickly there. But you can also, I clicked it a little quick, but tool 1980, the library dashboard. When we get to this to launch up, if you are currently authorized to the data warehouse, your credit union has a data warehouse and you are on the authority list to use it, then this tool defaults to looking at all the tables in your data warehouse. So this sample environment does have a couple of pages worth, and we can see who created this table, when it was created, the number of records inside that table. And so if this table is supposed to hold loan information, that's the number of loans that it showed up. If it's supposed to hold member information, that's the number of members, et cetera, et cetera. And we've got a summary box that's calculating the table size, your average table size, and the total number of data tables you've got stored in here. Here's where also you can go ahead, and I'll take this one and I'll just delete it really quick. And we can actually do some of those maintenance actions in here as well. Library authority list is that spot where it's a very simple all or nothing list. If your name is on this list, then you can work with the data warehouse. These tools will actually display something for you, and you could, if given additional permissions, actually do some uploads or downloads if your name is on this list. If you take someone's name off this list, they're immediately ineligible, and they'll get messages stating they're not authorized if they try to interact with anything that points toward the data warehouse. And then, of course, so 1310, 1980, and 1981 are those tools. These are new tools we have built specifically to support your use of the data warehouse, but do have those benefits and applications of being used for some of the other, to keep an eye on or review some of the other data sets in CUBase. And then, of course, tool 100 is where you'd write queries, and either your data table sources could live in the data warehouse, or you could set your query up to write your custom data tables to the data warehouse as their final destination. Then 1375, of course, data transfers and upload or download. This launches that external software that looks visually very different from CUBase. So let's look at that really quickly. We have a tab for both uploading and downloading. And if you are going to have a data warehouse, then one of the features that you will not have yet used to date, but will use often with the data warehouse, is this little feature in the icon bar for creating an IBMI database file. This is what you'd open up if you had an Excel file that you wanted to go ahead and map into CU-Base in your data warehouse so that it is ready to receive an upload of your custom file. You know, your custom file might be anywhere from 100 columns long to 3 columns long. We can't, the database doesn't know how to read it unless you tell it how to read it, and that's what this wizard accomplishes. I'll go ahead and cancel out of that. And really, that is the end of our quick tool overview. So if you're taking notes, we got our tool numbers all set, and you could take a look at those if you'd like. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If you have questions or would like to talk with us about ordering the data warehouse or what it could do for your credit union, please email ai@cuanswers.com. That's the letters A and I, and then @cuanswers.com. That gets right to our whole asterisk intelligence team, and whichever person is available will follow right up with you, and we can get that conversation going. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.